When do running backs peak and when do they start falling off the cliff? Now, this is one of the most important questions when it comes to dynasty fantasy football, because running backs, when they are at the peak, they cost Muko bucks. And what I mean by Muko bucks, they cost so much in dynasty fantasy football, because to have an elite running back is such a great thing to help you get your championship. Now, we have a lot of running backs getting to that point where they're 25, 26, 27, 28, even Derrick Henry, 29.1 years of age. We're going to be talking about what to do with some of these running backs. Statistically speaking, since like 2010, we're going to be talking about some data on what type of, or what running backs, what age do they start falling off the cliff? So very important questions that need to be answered here so you can dictate. And I've already seen one fantasy podcast that's more redraft, but they are into dynasty now, that have, gosh, they probably have over 100,000 subscribers, and they talked about how they would want some of these running backs over Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous and bonkers, as Bijan Robinson is my number one dynasty running back. Even Jahmyr Gibbs is a top 6 running back in my opinion. And so the first thing we're going to go through is we're going to go through some of the top 25 running backs. These are top 25 running backs that are over the age of 26. And then we have some borderline running backs, and we have some that are already fallen off the cliff. So we can see some guidelines of some running backs that have already basically been peaked down. So why are we even talking about this? Because when you can sell a running back at the top, you can get that prime value, and you can get some players that are on the rise, and you can keep your roster from falling apart. You don't have to go through contending, back to rebuild, or basically rebuilding, reloading, and then contending. You can just kind of stay into this contention area, which I have done successfully through some of my teams, and I've seen some really good owners do the same, is basically they are able to sell prospects at the peak or close to the peak, and that has allowed them to be able to kind of rejuvenate or replenish trades that look lopsided, like they just sold the farm. They sell the Camaras at the top level. They sell the Dalvin Cooks and stuff that we're going to be talking about. They sell those players at peak value, and now they start having these Kenneth Walkers, and they start having Javantes and all these different other players that seem to be start to rise. And that is ultimately what you're trying to do and why you're watching this video. So number 3. Christian McCaffrey, 26.7. Then you have Barkley, who's 6th overall, 26 years of age. And Eckler is 27.7, who went from a fantasy finish of 2 to 1. These are all in PPR. And so you really have these 3 running backs in the top 10. And I want to briefly talk about these 3 running backs first, because we're going to be looking at peak age. And so peak age of any running back is 25.5 years of age. And now you could say that CMC, Barkley, and Eckler are probably more into the elite category, at least elite as of late, because Eckler's had 2 top 2 finishes over the last 2 years. CMC has had those finishes, and Barkley has had an amazing year this year and in his rookie year as well. So these 3 running backs, what are we doing with them? Where are we ranking them? And so Barkley is not a top 5 running back for me. CMC is not a top 5 running back for me. Barkley is not a top 5 running back either. Now, Barkley is 26, so he does have a little bit of, he has some months. He'll probably be 26 and a half when we get to the point of the NFL starting season, or the season of 2023 here. So are we buying it? Are we thinking that he is potentially he's already peaked, or he's going to peak? And so I'm going to have some data up here that shows since 2010, you've had running backs peak at the age of 25.5, but that doesn't really give us the clear category of elite running backs. We want to know, well, what about the elite ones? What about the top 10 running backs? What about the CMCs, the Gurleys, the Bells, like all the David Johnsons, the running backs that had these elite seasons? And so when we cut that down, so the running backs who've had over 250 fantasy points in a year, we look and the actual age actually drops. It even gets worse to 24.75 as being their peak age. So to know that you've had their best season is likely the average of 24.75. So likely CMC, Barkley, and Eckler have all passed their top prime seasons, which we kind of understood that. We kind of figured that. But even Barkley is kind of like whoa, I guess maybe this is the selling peaking point. And I've seen him all the way up into the fantasy top 4, top 5 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And I just can't have him there being 26 years old. I know that he has a little bit less tread on his tires with previous injuries, but At 26, I cannot have him in good conscience. We've seen some great seasons still out of these running backs. But again, my point is to start selling on the downslope. I understand that running backs might have a good year when they're 26 or 27, but the value difference, so everyone can have an idea, the value difference between Kamara and Cook and Henry, all last year to this year, these running backs were obviously easily top 10 running backs. And now you look at Kamara, 17, Cook, 21, Henry, 24. They have not only dropped out of that like top 15, they're hanging on by a thread being an RB2 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. The fantasy football landscape in 1 year can be a ton. I watched Kamara get traded for A.J. Brown 16 months ago. I watched Dalvin Cook get traded for the farm 14 months ago. And you want to be able to trade these running backs now. We're going to give you a couple of different running backs that we want you to potentially trade to that are into that age. When you start getting from that like 25 to 26 or 26 to 27, like this, their value drops. People always say, well, don't trade them too early. I'm okay with them having a good year, not on my roster. Let's continue on with some of the players. Nick Chubb, 27.1. Mixon, 26.5. Kamara, 27.5. Aaron Jones, 28.2. Dalvin Cook, 27.5. And Derrick Henry, 29.1. Honestly, all these running backs right now, when you're looking at Mixon and below, are probably worth early seconds or worse. I mean, that's where we're at this point. They might have a good year, but they're 12 month. They're like a 12 to 18 month window. Dalvin Cook may not even be a Viking. Mixon has been sharing time with now Samaje Perine. Who knows if they draft a running back? I could easily see them draft a running back. Nick Chubb, extreme slowdown to the season. Now, we're going to look at what they were. So, a lot of these running backs, 26 just to 27. I'm going to give you some of the fantasy finishes that they had. Eckler went from 2 to 1. Chubb went 13 to 6. Mixon went 4 to 10. Kamara went 8 to 16. Aaron Jones went 10 to 9. Cook went 16 to 11. And Henry went 21 to 4. I mean, it looks like on paper, when you just give those fantasy finishes, you go, they did better their 26, 27 year than they did their 25 year. But their value in Dynasty Fantasy Football dropped completely. A lot of these running backs, again, like I said, top 10, top 15 running backs, they have slotted down 10, 15 spots in Dynasty because you had the rookie class of 2022. You've had the rookie class of 2023. And you've had some younger running backs push themselves up, whether it has been Tony Pollard, there's just been plenty of, again, breakouts or players that are slowly pushing themselves into that roster, whether it's J.K. Dobbins, like you get some of these running backs recovering from injury. Cam Akers, again, another running back that's young or recovering from injury. And then you get some running backs that do fall off like CEH, but we won't talk about him. But I also want you to understand, yes, they finished better in some years, but let's look at the games finished. Chubb went from 13 to 6, but he had 14 games played. Now he went to 17, so he actually had 3 games. Mixon, 4 to 10. He went actually down a game. He lost a game. Kamara, 8 to 16, but he actually played 2 more games in his 16 year than he did his 8 year. Then you have Aaron Jones, played 2 more games, went up a spot. Cook, 16 to 11, played 4 more games. 14, 15, 16, 17, 4 more games. Derrick Henry went from 21 to 4, but he played, instead of 8 games, he played 16, and you could see that he wasn't the elite category he was last year. And so, again, we look at a lot of these running backs are getting to the point where you want to sell. Now, Eckler is somebody that finished second, finished first. I'm an Eckler owner. Tried selling last year, didn't work. I feel like this is the time. I am going to sell for what I can here. Barkley, he's 26. He's the only one that is kind of like, well, he doesn't have the tread on his tires. But again, I'd rather have Jahmyr Gibbs than I would Saquon Barkley. And I've sseen that trade actually reversed, where I've seen Barkley traded for 102, 103, 104. And it's like, I would rather have easily Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs over Saquon Barkley. But there's some names that I also want to talk about that have been hot names, and this was even before the injury of his fibula. I believe he broke his fibula. Tony Pollard, 25.8. Miles Sanders, 25.8. And David Montgomery, 25.7. We know that they are potentially all three going to go to different teams, but that is A, concerning thing. We don't like that. And B, we also know that they are getting to the point where this might be their peak value, especially for Tony Pollard. It's probably his peak value. Miles Sanders had just a bunch of touchdowns. Again, peak value, especially Miles Sanders coming off the potential Super Bowl win here. We'll see. Already fallen off. These are running backs that were, again, up into that kind of 15-20 range. that are just completely like top 30. They're not even there. And it's Ezekiel Elliott, it's Leonard Fournette, and James Conner. And again, this is what happens when you get running backs that you don't sell early enough. Now, there are situations, and so we're at 10 minutes here, and there are situations, yes, I'm just going to hold on to them. If you're a highly contending team and there's just teams not giving you even an early second for some of these players, whether it's Aaron Jones or Dalvin Cook, ride them out for a year. You know what? You might get an RB2 finish out of some of these guys. You might get even a RB12 finish out of a player or two. But again, these are players that I am trying to sell now. At any point, if I can find times, now in the draft it's going to be hard, but you know what? Go for 2024 picks. Go for a 2024 pick, because likely a 2024 pick is going to be a little bit easier to give up for other owner than a 2023 pick. And maybe you can end up packaging a Dalvin Cook and a second for a first, or Dalvin Cook and somebody and a second for a first. Like, these are trades that I am doing right now, if I possibly can, to get into that 2024 class, or I am just trying to get a younger running back. Give me an A.J. Dillon over a lot of these different running backs. He's got a couple years on these players. Honestly, you look at Alexander Madison, he might go somewhere that Alexander Madison might have some of the similar values as some of these running backs. So just know that James Cook, again, another running back. It's just like a lot of running backs I would rather have over these players that are aging and getting towards the end of their career. And this is why last year I even created one of the most controversial, I believe, so far, shorts. YouTube shorts that I had, because I said sell Cook, sell Kamara, sell Mixon, sell Eckler, and all these different running backs. If you are if you're not a top 2-3 team, because really you can try to recoup that value somewhere else. You can sell that player, and if you're not a top 2-3 team, and you can get so much better value now versus what you can get in 12 months. And so, again, the entirety of this video is supposed to be for how and when are you supposed to sell running backs? 26.0 is the age that I am like, hey, and I've told somebody to buy Barkley because they were going to get him for like 105, 106. You know what? That's an opportunity. Barkley is a top 6 owned running back right now. I feel like he's a very temporary buy that you can flip pretty quickly to even potentially get better value short term, almost like a short sale. And, well, it wouldn't be a short sale because that short sales technically in stock mean going down, but like a short up. I don't know if that's even a thing. I think it's going to be a quick little up here for Barkley, but then I feel like he's going to be definitely an easier person to be able to sell a little bit higher. So again, some of these running backs, you just have to do 26.0. When I see that age, that magical age, if it's coming up, like, I am selling. I'm okay with running backs there's a lot of these running backs that had top 20 finishes last year. I'm okay with them having a good year that's not on my team, because I know that second year, that third year, they're going to start falling off dramatically. And if you sold Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, David Johnson a season early, you know how it feels. It feels great. I have sold, all right, I sold Derrick Henry too early, you could potentially say. I sold him at 27. I sold him 2 years ago. And I don't have any regrets about it, because I ended up getting a better running back. I ended up getting Javonte out of the deal. And yes, Javonte has not been up to the hype there, but I'm okay with it, because I think Javonte, you look at Javonte in Dynasty, he's higher than 24th. So yeah, I lost the first year or two, but the next 3 years, 4 years, I'm going to win, because Javante's going to be a better prospect. And then in 2-3 years, when hopefully Javante's in the top 10 and he's probably right around that 25, 26 range, I'm going to do it all over again. All right, this is Marcus Dynasty. Peace out. We'll see you guys soon.